The Legend of Zelda is my favorite video game franchise of all time, but I have a bit of a confession to make. I've actually kind of fallen out with the series for a while. I played all of the main series console games up to Twilight Princess, but my family never got a Wii. They went Xbox 360 that generation, and so I missed Skyward Sword. Definitely didn't get a Wii U, so I was never able to get to the remake of Wind Waker, but I did get the Switch, and I actually have all 3 Switch Zelda games. I have 3 of the 4 Zelda games for the Switch. But I've been busy with life and other projects, so I've never really gotten an opportunity to catch up with what I've missed. That is, until now. You see, I had a thought. It's usually incredibly dangerous when this happens, but I decided to give it a go. You see, I usually review cartoons on this channel. One of my more recent reviews was of the actual Zelda cartoon.
Hey! Excuse me, princess!
And then I thought, what if review was video games? I mean, it's not totally without pretense. I have reviewed video games on this channel before, like once. Then again, some people have shown interest when I have floated this idea. So, what do I got to lose? This is my retrospective of the Legend of Zelda series. I'm going back to the very beginning of the series and take a look at each and every game with a more critical eye. All of them. Now, there are times when I'm going to be harsher, even towards some of the more loved games in the series. It may even come across as nitpicking sometimes. So, I want to say this from the outset. I can only do this because I love these games. I love most of these games. I would not be able to go in as deep as I can in many of these games if I didn't beat them time and again. Most of the Zelda games that I have played and beaten many times. On the other side of the token, I'll try to be as fair to the games I have yet to play. Many of them, Skyward Sword, the Oracle games, and Phantom Hourglass, I've yet to play because I have not heard great things about them. Then again, I've heard bad things about every single Zelda game after Ocarina and before Breath of the Wild when they came out. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Let's start where it all began. Now that's a sound that just hits me right in the nostalgia. Once again, to be upfront, this is a game that I did grow up with. Why do I bring this up? Because I've heard this a lot, that this game has aged rather poorly. Most notably with a review by Some Call Me Johnny. And considering that that review was 8 years ago, yes, really, the game itself hasn't gotten any younger. I mean, it was an early NES game. Not quite a launch title, but not far behind. In the NES era, most developers were still trying to figure out how to make a proper full-fledged video game, and not a repeating one-screen affair where the only point was to get points. Like, if you go back to the original Super Mario Bros., a lot of those levels are repeats. You can come across many levels that just have the same layout as a previous level with just a few more obstacles. Many developers didn't know what was fair, what was cruel, and almost every genre was archaic at the time, and NES games had many technical limitations. The beefiest games could only barely reach 1 megabyte of storage space, and developers wanted these very small games to last as long as possible. People could generally only afford 1 new game per month, so they used a lot of cheap tricks that are taboo today, making the game absurdly difficult, confusing, or cryptic. And the bad translations didn't help either. Despite all of this though, the original Legend of Zelda has gone down as a classic. To this day, it continually gets re-released, and it seems to be beloved in the gaming community. So I guess the question I'm asking here is, does it hold up? Let's pretend that no other Zelda game exists, and see if this is still a worthwhile play in 2021. The game's 35th anniversary. Oh, Song of Time, where did you go? Alright, The Legend of Zelda. So the story is... yes. It's more or less a basic fairy tale plot that most games were using at the time. Sprite is you, princesses win. There's a bit more to it than usual, at least for a non-RPG game. The Prince of Darkness, Ganon, the weird pig demon, is trying to conquer the land of Hyrule. So the princess of this land, Zelda, broke the Triforce into 8 units and hides them in dungeons full of Ganon's minions. Yeah, good going, Zelda. Then she gets captured. And now there's only one person who can save the world. He's canonically known as Link, but since I don't want to get criticized for being cliche again, I'm just gonna call him Pineapple. And oh dear Groose. So, the overall story of this game is that you're trying to stop Ganon from taking over the world. But, it looks like he already kinda did. So let's see here. Besides all the monsters running around, things don't look too happy. There aren't many people in the world of Hyrule, and those that are here are buried in caves. And like 90% of them are old. So whatever's been going on has probably been going on for a while. Got dead trees everywhere, and the biggest area on the map is the graveyard. There's not even a speck of grass anywhere. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I never really liked how this game looked. I know it was an early NES game, but is some grass really too much to ask for? Dragon Quest gave me grass. When I tell this to people, they usually say it's because Pineapple is also green, or at least dressed in green. He'd blend into the ground around him. Those people have never found the magic ring that turns Pineapple's outfit gray, that does blend in with this beige desert color. And despite being gray, I never lost track of him after getting the magic ring. I know this is not the biggest complaint in the world. All I'm saying is that maybe more people would know that the desert is supposed to be a desert if the whole world didn't look like a desert. The enemy graphics aren't too much better, moblins don't look too different from Gorias, levers look like sorry game pieces, and the rocks that fall from Death Mountain look like donut holes. As for music, the songs in this game are really great. They're classics. The starting song gets you entranced with its sense of mystery. Before taking you in on an adventure of its own, when the items you'll be coming across start scrolling down the screen. The dungeon music is spooky and foreboding, creating a sense of atmosphere as you fight your way through these trials and enemies. And the overworld theme, it's so catchy you could listen to it for hours. You, will be listening to this for hours, because for 95% of the game, the overworld theme and the dungeon theme are the only musical tracks. The final level does have its own unique track, but other than that, you'll be hearing this, and keep in mind, this game was designed to take days or weeks to beat it if you don't know where everything is, and didn't have the internet which didn't exist yet to look things up. The overworld theme is fantastic, and I love it, just, you know, I need something to break up the monotony. That would be very nice. You know, other than this. Which you'll also probably be hearing quite a lot, because this game is not easy. Zelda 2 usually gets a lot of flack for being the most difficult game in the series, but the original is no slouch in that department, and that comes mostly down to the controls. The NES is actually capable of 8-directional movement. You'd never know that if you played most NES games. In The Legend of Zelda, you can only move in 4 directions. If you're not used to it, or you are used to one of the more modern Zelda games, it can come across as really stiff. Even I needed a brief period to get adjusted to it, but it really isn't much of an issue, at least at first. Level 1's enemies are fairly simple and can be taken out without too much effort, but the enemies and the enemy placement quickly go from cruel to evil. It starts off with one occasional room. The room where you get the boomerang in level 2, for instance, you gotta take out these boomerang brothers while statues keep wailing at you. Without the magic ring, this room is very difficult. By level 8, you're dodging statue fire while trying to hit a boss that only briefly opens its eye that never gives you a moment to breathe. You know what the difference between this and Gradius is? In Gradius, you're not controlling a forklift. Often the game does require you to maneuver when it's really not possible. With that being said, there are maybe a dozen enemy types in the game, and on their own, only 2 are really a problem. Keese, Stalfos, and the like go down pretty easily. Just a couple of sword swipes, or even a boomerang attack in some cases, and you're good. Then you have Dark Nuts, introduced in level 3. These things conjured up nothing but terror in 7-year-old me. And as an adult, I still feel uncomfortable entering a room with these things. So here's how they work. You can only hit them from the sides or the back. And here's how Pineapple works. His sword is only barely enough to hit them from a safe distance. Because more often than not, when you attack a Dark Nut, they'll turn in your direction. And if they turn in your direction, they move in your direction. I've been playing this game for more than 20 years, and if there is any kind of pattern to how or when the Dark Nuts turn, I've never found it. But the biggest issue with them is that the game likes to throw so many of them at once, and it's almost always mandatory that you have to kill them all. And when there's a lot of Dark Nuts, or worse, blocks taking up space in a room with a lot of Dark Nuts, or even worse, statues shooting at you while you need to fight Dark Nuts, it can be like doing precision surgery to get through a room with any health left. Most of my deaths were in level 8 because of this room right here with the dark nuts and statues. I could get through it, but by that time I was really low on health, and the game is nice enough to make sure there's another room up ahead full of dark nuts that you've also got to kill. And if you die, all common enemies in a dungeon respawn. The other big problem enemy is the Wizrobes. They don't do as much damage as the Dark Nuts, but it's harder to take them out without getting hit yourself, because they like to teleport all around the place. And if they see you, they start machine gunning mean beams at your face. With those two enemies, it makes it sound like the game only has sporadic difficulty spikes. But, no. You see, the developers know how the enemies work together, to your detriment. So let me introduce you to the bubble. This disco skull doesn't do any damage to you directly, but when it hits you, you can't use your sword. You have to rely on your sub-weapons. On its own, this is no big deal. However, when they put a like in the room, now we got a problem. Or you do, if you bought a big shield, because the like eats the big shield, and you can't hurt it because you can't use your sword anymore. Pro tip, never buy the big shield. You won't need it, and you couldn't keep it anyway. But one of the most aggravating rooms in the entire game is the one that combines bubbles with wall masters towards the end of level 7. Wall masters, like bubbles, don't hurt you. What they do is take you back to the beginning of the level, so it's more or less an insta-kill. I mean, you still have your health, whoop-de-doo. When you choose to continue after dying in a dungeon, you start with only 3 hearts. And considering how difficult some of these levels can be, you're probably better off pretending that this game boots you back to the start like Zelda 2. Because you ain't going to be beating many dungeons with only 3 hearts. Unless you like hearing this. Wow, that is the most annoying sound that I've ever heard. Well, I wouldn't worry about it so much. I'm sure that Nintendo, as a professional game developing company, has some common sense and would make sure that such an annoying sound won't be in any future Zelda games after this one. Seriously, this sound makes me want to go commit die. Lots of games do this, I understand, but it is always a problem and no game should ever do this. Seriously, could you make the sound effect any more annoying?
Hey! Excuse me, princess! Hey! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me!
Well, I guess that answers that question. No, you cannot make the beeping hearts sound more annoying than they already are. Luckily, if you don't want to hear the heart beeps, you can drink a magic potion to refill your health immediately. Oh yes, this sound is so much better. So, I've been really negative up to this point. It sounds like I really don't like this game. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I really do like this game. I'm just not blind to its flaws, many of which are just because of its age. I mean, yeah, it is difficult, but it's not unfair like a lot of NES games. Well, it is kind of unfair and it kind of isn't. The mechanics are always consistent. You know immediately what does what can hurt you, what can help you, and so on. Things that are incredibly important to beating this game, such as the medicine shop, a fairy fountain, and the candle, are all pretty close to the start, and every single one of the dungeons aren't too difficult to find. You don't have much versatility, but you don't really need that much of it. While I often felt outgunned, I never felt like the game was explicitly going out of its way to get me killed. This is how you do difficulty in a game correctly. And yeah, I do wish that you restarted with full health, but I really wouldn't change anything else about the overall difficulty. Ironically enough, most of the bosses are really easy, at least the mandatory ones. You can beat Aquamentus and Donga without getting hit. You can kill Manhandla with 1 bomb. Well, maybe you can, I obviously can't, but it is possible. And Goma goes down in 1 hit. The only boss in this game that's given me any trouble is the multi-headed Gleeox. Even Ganon isn't much of a problem. It's not a very good fight with Ganon. You need to stab around randomly because he is invisible and hope that you randomly hit him a few times. But it's not difficult. One thing this game often gets criticized for is being cryptic, which is not something I agree with. Yes, the translation of this game is very bad. To this day, I do not know what Eastmost Peninsula has the secret means. Hyrule doesn't have any peninsulas in this game. What people often bring up is that this game doesn't give you much direction. Nothing is spelled out for you. And quite honestly, that's what I love about this game. Nothing is spelled out for you. The game doesn't give you much direction. A lot of more modern games, even within the Zelda franchise, really do spell things out for you. A little too much. And by a little too much, I mean a lot. to the point where it can make you feel kind of like an idiot, and not in a good way. The Zelda series is known for puzzle solving, and it should require you to use your head. And placing a crack on the wall wherever a bomb is needed, that's not a puzzle. That's not a hidden secret. That might as just well be open. You may as well replace bombs with keys. The original Legend of Zelda doesn't have any cracks on the walls at all. Now, when there are no cracks on the walls, how do you know where you can bomb or use the candle for that matter? Well, in the dungeons it's pretty obvious. There are only 4 directions in which a bomb can be used, and if you got a map, you generally have a good idea at where the boundaries of the dungeon are. But outside, when everything looks the same and there's no obvious telltale signs, how do you find anything? Well, here's an example. Here is the area right above the area you begin. The back of this area has a couple of indents. Now the first thing that comes to mind is to place a bomb in the smaller indent. That looks intuitive. Nothing there though. What about the other side? Boom, secret. It's really not that cryptic. Like, most of the actual secrets in this game are pretty intuitive. This one lone rock by the ocean. Come on, where else would anyone put a secret? There's a corner tile on the map that you can't reach? Well, there has to be something there. What if I tried to push against this wall? I mean, the shop for the meat is hidden in the bush that's on the corner. Am I just crazy or too used to this game? I'm not saying that these are obvious, but I do think that an average person could figure these things out without the help of the internet or even the aid of a friend on the playground. I know this because most of these things I figured out myself as a young child. I can't guarantee that this will work for every secret in the game, but it did help me get all of the heart pieces and enough caches of rupees to let me buy everything I needed and find all 9 dungeons. The Garaya in level 7 gets a lot of flack. You probably know the solution by now because of how cryptic people claim it to be. You've got to give him the meat, or the enemy bait, but the only hint you've got is grumble grumble. That alone is quite a bit esoteric, definitely, but it's not like you've got a lot of options. If you attack him, the fires start attacking you. So what's the only item that you have that's not an attack? Oh, the meat. On top of that, Garayas are one of the few enemies that are attracted to the bait. And sure, nothing tells you to go out and buy the bait, but if you see an item in a game like this and you don't want to buy it, I don't know what to tell you. The map itself gets a lot of hate too. You know, this big gray box. The overworld map is definitely not helpful, but you can do what I did, and I drew my own map. I mean, it's not the best map in the world, obviously, because I started in the middle, but it kind of feels pretty good that I have physical proof that I made it through this game. This is probably the old school gamer in me talking, but there is something satisfying about drawing maps, taking notes, like you had to do in those old games. Although I probably should have used a bigger piece of paper. Hyrule in this game is quite large, especially for an NES game. While it wasn't the first open world game, Ultima 1 is arguably the first true open world game, The Legend of Zelda gave us a world full of possibility, full of mystery. It was the first game that I can remember, at least on a console, that let you do what you wanted to do. Go wherever you want to go. Hey kid, don't want to go to level 1? That's fine. You can start off with level 3, 2, 8, 5, or 6. You know, if you want to. You might not be able to get through Dungeon 5 yet, but maybe you can see what you're going to be up against in the future. I've heard this term once before, and like, never again, so I don't know who came up with this term, or if it's really even a term that other people use, but I've heard this called the start to slime ratio. The question it poses is this: how long does it take for the player to get from pressing the start button to actually doing what they got the game for? For example, in Dragon Quest, how long does it take from starting the game to fighting your first slime? And having very, very bad start to slime ratios is something that really gets to me in most modern games. Even in modern Zelda games. Wind Waker is probably the worst example of this in the entire series. Why do people want to play that game? Usually, it's because you want to sail on the Great Sea and find adventures on new islands, explore the ocean. Great! It takes about 2 hours to get the boat, and 5 hours for the game to finally let you go where you want to go. And even then, the game tells you to head straight to the next target with no delay. Like I said though, that is probably the worst example in the Zelda series, but even A Link Between Worlds, which was praised for abandoning a lot of the baggage the series had been pulling along since Ocarina, still made you get through the entire first dungeon before you could really go about your own business. The most ridiculous start to slime ratio I can think of is Animal Crossing New Horizons, which has one of about 2 weeks. real time. Once you start noticing this and keeping track of it, it'll probably irritate you to no end like it irritates me. You see, the original Legend of Zelda has a start to slime ratio of 0 seconds. You press that start button, and you're off doing exactly what you want to do, going wherever you want to go. You don't even need to get the sword. No long unskippable cutscenes, training dungeon, mandatory hide-and-seek game, learning how to use the slingshot that you never use again. It's just play the game. Who would have thought that when I pressed the play button, I wanted to play the game? I personally believe that this is not too much to ask for, even in a modern game. Stardew Valley, for instance. Create your character, you can skip the cutscene that you've seen a million times, and you're off, doing exactly what you want to do in the game. Sure, not everything is open to you right away, but even on replay, you're able to do pretty much whatever you'd want to do. And I understand a lot of this is for first-time players, and playing through a game the first time, this isn't going to affect you much, but here's the way I see it. A video game that you only play once is a bad video game. Video games that are designed well should expect players to play them again. And one way that absolutely kills replayability is having a bad start to slime ratio. This is the #1 thing that keeps me away from most modern games, especially AAA ones, no matter the developer. I don't want to play an RPG and wait 3 hours before I get to the very first battle Persona 4. In an open world game like Zelda, I really don't want to have to wait hours to experience that open world. I know that this sounds incredibly impatient, and perhaps I am an impatient person, but there is something that you really have to keep in mind. Time is a commodity. In this day and age, a lot of people don't have a lot of spare time to spend on video games because they're always working. And even the people that do have a lot of spare time, they have a ton of other options that start immediately. I'm always going to see it as a problem that I can beat the original Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Link's Awakening back to back before Wind Waker even opens up. And I'm bringing this up specifically now because this is a problem that most modern Zelda games have. It is something that we'll be coming back to. I'm not saying that I want all Zelda games to start instantly. I mean, being able to skip the starting cutscene that I've seen a million times would be a nice start, but what I'm saying is that you've got to put the focus on where it should be. And while the Zelda games do get more story focused as time goes on, and they can have some really good stories, the series is primarily a gameplay focused one. When most people think of Zelda, they think of delving dungeons, solving puzzles, getting cool new items, and not so much the game's creation myth. The original Legend of Zelda is an example of something very specific. Graphics age poorly. Even innovation ages poorly. This game was the first cartridge-based video game to allow battery backup saves. You know how you save your game without dying? You press up and A on the second controller. One thing that never gets old, that never really ages, is the raw gameplay experience. Even if it's been iterated on 1,000 times, when you get down to it, The Legend of Zelda is really fun to play. Back a few years ago, I set out to really beat this game for the first time. I got deep into the weeds with the secrets. And yes, I played the game without a guide, because when it comes to playing a game blind, there are two options. You do it once or you do it never. And back then, I was immersed in the world. Even if it looked dead, there was mystery, things to find. Sure, sometimes I lost money due to door repairs, but it made finding that heart piece all the sweeter. However, as you might point out, nowadays, I know all the secrets. I can find all of the heart pieces in each cache of rupees, guide or not, because it's all conscripted to memory. I know the exact layout of the world. However, that sense of mystery hasn't really gone away, because of how well the game is designed. When I originally played and beat it, it took me a good few days, and I must have died dozens of times doing it. In this current playthrough that I've done for this review, I died about 8 times, and I beat it in just over 2 hours. When you beat a game in just over 2 hours, it becomes super tempting to try and beat it again. See if you can get that time under 2 hours. Who knows? Maybe one of these days I can beat the game without dying. Now it's all about seeing how well I can do, how well I can optimize things, where the limits of my own abilities are here. Because the dungeons in this game can be completed in a wide variety of orders, it begs you to experiment. Even without the second quest or a swordless run, there are many different ways to play the game. Masters of the game can beat it 100% in just over half an hour, although they do use glitches, and yes, this game has a lot of them. Most famously is this screen teleportation glitch. Like that one, a lot of the glitches in this game are really beneficial, but some of them not so much. Here's something that no one else points out, but the flute item is completely broken. Well, sort of. The flute has two uses. Number one, it warps you to each dungeon entrance in sequence, so 1, then 2, then 3. It's also used to open Dungeon 7, and when these two uses intersect, that's when the game has an issue. Because the flute opens Dungeon 7, it cannot be used to teleport from Dungeon 7 to beyond. So you have to leave the area, and when you do that, the flute teleports you back to level 7. So you're stuck teleporting back to level 7, and maybe the level you completed before it, because you can't go beyond that because it keeps leaving you trapped at level 7. The last time I played this game, a couple of years ago, I did it for a series. I had this book, 1001 Video Games You Must Play Before You Die, and I was going through each of the games of the book to really see if it was a must-play. Since the book had a lot of weird entries like Uno. Yes, Uno, the card game, is a video game that you must play before you die according to the book. And when I got to this game, the original Legend of Zelda, I actually originally said no. That this was not a game that you had to play to really have a complete video game experience. It was a close call though, because the game is very innovative. My biggest issue at the time was actually with the grinding. You see, you need a lot of rupees to get through the game. The meat costs 60 rupees, the candle costs another 60, the arrow costs 80 rupees, and the magic ring, that's gonna cost you 250, 5 below the maximum amount of rupees. Keep in mind, every time you fire an arrow, that costs you another rupee. Every time you want a magic potion, because, you know, you just have to hear this beautiful sound, that's 68. And potion costs can stack up fast if you're not very good at the game. But if you're not so reliant on the potions, and you stay away from the big shield and the extra keys, the hidden rupees on the map are enough to buy every mandatory item in the game, especially if you know how to get bombs without buying them. So I definitely think I want to rescind my old verdict. At no point do you ever have to farm for rupees, even if you want the big expensive cool stuff. The game is actually paced pretty nicely. Although, the dungeons don't go in sequential order of difficulty. Like, Dungeon 3 is harder than Dungeons 4 and 5, and the only dungeons that are easier than 7 are Dungeons 1 and 2. So, a new verdict. This game has a few wrinkles here and there, because it's very old. It also has some beliefs that probably should have been left in the last century. But not only was it a pioneer, it's still influencing games in this day and age, even beyond the Zelda franchise itself. While very few games have its explicit sense of total freedom, there are quite a lot of open world games in this day and age. I can definitely say that this is not a game for everyone, but I do think that if you want to have a complete video game experience, you know, just see what the whole medium has to offer, this is definitely one that you should give a chance. Because I do believe that modern games could still learn a lot from it. And now I'm just procrastinating because we both know what's coming next, and I'm not going to enjoy it. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this weird step out of my comfort zone. I hope that you really did enjoy this video. Sorry if it's a little bit clunky, I'm still trying to get a hand on this particular formula reviewing video games. If you liked the video, and if possible, can you please like, share, and spread this video around? Times have been tough as of late, and they probably won't be getting any easier for quite some time. If you like what you saw, please leave a comment and let me know, and I might just make this a more regular thing, even beyond the Zelda franchise. I really do love video games, and there's many that I want to talk about. And before we leave, I want to give a thank you to my very generous patrons, the names that you are seeing down below. For $2 or more, you can see your name here as well. The link to that and my other socials will be in the description below. Either way, I'm hoping that we can experience all of Pineapple's adventures together.